It is absolutely a great privilege for me to be given the opportunity to talk about Brisbane and southeast Queensland and its World War II heritage, which I assume most of you know is what I'm going to be addressing today. And I thought the most appropriate place to start was the sinking of the Centaur off of Moreton Bay, which was the hospital ship that I'm hoping that at least the name might have been recognisable to all of you in the room. And 15 years to the day yesterday, which happened to be my birthday as well, the wreck of the Centaur was finally discovered using the same technology that was used to find the Titanic off of Brisbane. And if you want to see a very moving tribute to one of the survivors, Sister Elaine Savage, who was the sole surviving female nurse of that sinking, can I suggest a visit to Anzac Square to the World War II galleries. And the history of World War II that is to be found in Brisbane, but also in surrounding areas, is really quite amazing. And I am very grateful of the opportunity to speak to you in relation to that heritage. And from the sinking of the Centaur, I'd like to jump then to the response by General Douglas MacArthur to that sinking, who was outraged that on his doorstep such an atrocious violation of war etiquette was perpetrated. And he led and arranged for a response, and it was called Operation Jaywick. And that was conceived, driven, executed from Brisbane. And that resulted in 39,000 tonnes of Japanese shipping being sent to the bottom of the harbour in Singapore. And the vessel that delivered the commandos to the front entrance of Singapore was called the Crate. And that particular vessel, there's a wonderful painting in the General Douglas MacArthur Museum. And it was actually painted by my mother. And another little connection in relation to that sinking was that they celebrated the successful mission with Beanley rum, which at the time, in the 1940s, controlled or was accounted for about 84% of the Australian rum market. And you just think of how omnipresent Beanley is, Bundaberg is today, and it's got about 55% of the market, so you can imagine just how popular Beanley rum was. And it's just, again, you can see the connections are being formed in what I'm trying to present. And another interesting chapter, and I bet if I say JFK, everyone knows who I'm talking about, but I bet you didn't know that he was actually saved by the Australian Coast Watching Service. And last year, or this year actually, this year? Yeah, was the 80th anniversary of his saving, and Caroline Kennedy, it must have been last year, Caroline Kennedy came up to Brisbane and participated in a very moving memorial to it. But Coast Watchers is, you won't believe this, but there is no memorial, no mainland Australian memorial to Coast Watchers. There will be next year, and a small group of dedicated individuals who just remind me of the cooperation between Nick and Shane, just how productive this little group is. Will be seeing a memorial at Newstead Terrace Park, and the Coast Watchers were conceived by a fellow called Eric Felt, who ended up being a long-term Commander Exalt, who ended up being a long-term resident of Brisbane, and it was a visionary development of a service, naval service, that had its antecedents in World War I, but it was updated. And again, it was all driven out of Brisbane. And so, you know, just no mean feat, the tributes and achievements that were driven out of Brisbane in World War II. And that memorial that I mentioned is going to be installed in Newstead Terrace Park. And in Newstead Terrace Park, there is a memorial to the survivors of the Kukui-Maru, which was a Japanese freighter that was stopped to the gunwales of prisoners of war that was sunk accidentally by an American submarine. And I think about 70 survivors, there weren't a horrible large number of them, ended up being offloaded by American submarines in Newstead wharves. And not far away from that particular memorial, and that memorial was unveiled on the 15th of the 10th, 2004. And not far away from that is another memorial, USA Goucher Victory Memorial. And I find this particular fact quite amazing because on the 22nd of December 1941, the first concrete on the ground example of American efforts to help Australia was seen with the arrival of what was called the Pensacola Convoy. Now there's Pensacola Convoy Place at Brett's Wharf, and a historian by the name of Noel Tunney was instrumental in driving that. I myself wrote the petition and drove the petition, but it wasn't actually my idea. And it took him 30 years to see that particular place delivered from when he first started work on a memorial place which was called the Gateway to Victory, which was at the old Brett's Wharf restaurant. And sometimes it takes a large amount of time for some of these memorials to come about. And USA Goucher Victory, Goucher College was the original namesake. Goucher College was a all-female college, and it supplied a large number of the code breakers that were instrumental in seeing the Germans and the Japanese sort of beat with extra intel. And the reason that came about was because on the 22nd of December 1947, there was the very first parade of an unknown soldier through the streets of Brisbane. The parade itself actually started in Ipswich. The Americans guided it to Brisbane City Hall, and then the Australians took over and guided it to Newstead Terrace Wharf, and it was then loaded up. And it was the last of 1,947 American coffins that were repatriated back via Guam, mostly to Punchbowl in Hawaii, but a lot of them went all over America to other war service memorials. So 22nd of December 1947, a very significant date, and it wasn't until last year that a memorial was established in Brisbane to honour that. And the year before there was a memorial that was established for Pensacola Convoy, which arrived in Brisbane on the 22nd of December 1941. And 80 odd years, no recognition. And you'd find that surprising because in Brisbane there is 170 purely World War II museums, memorials, places, parks, you name it. 170 odd. So, there's still a lot of fleshing out of the narrative of the history of World War II to be made in Brisbane. And as I sort of move to a conclusion, before I take questions, which I hope I might have sparked. One of the most significant memorials is the Australian-American War Memorial in Newstead Park. And you might say, why is that significant? Well, firstly, it's the first one that was unveiled 10 years to the day after the Battle of the Coral Sea. It was significant in establishing the friendship and bonds between the Americans and Australians. It was instrumental in ensuring that the ANZAS Treaty came about. It was driven by Richard Casey, who later became Lord Casey, who became the first Australian-born Governor-General. And Richard Casey was born in Queensland. He migrated, or his family migrated, down to Victoria, to Toorak. The family was incredibly wealthy because their wealth came out of the Mount Morgan gold mines. He went into federal parliament. He ran against Robert Menzies in his first stint to try and get the prime ministership, and Robert Menzies obviously became the prime minister. And Robert Menzies shipped him to be the first ambassador over to America. But he was an incredibly astute and intelligent man, and he set about from 1939 to 1941 trying to convince the American Navy, Army, Air Force and communities that Brisbane was the best place to respond to any attack that the Japanese may make. And they didn't know it was going to be at Pearl Harbor, but there was common discussion. But he knew enough about Brisbane to know that we had the South Brisbane Dry Dock, perfect for service and maintenance of submarines. And he was responsible for bringing Pensacola Convoy into Brisbane. It arrived on the 22nd of December 1941. And a mystery remains to this day that I've not been able to solve as to who arranged the Parade of the Unknown Soldier 6 years to the day after the Pensacola Convoy arrived. So there's still lots of really interesting stories to be told, and I will conclude on the fact that when the Pensacola Convoy was off of Brisbane, Pensacola, USS Pensacola put up a float plane, and it was crewed by Ensign Robert Rogers and radio man Glenn Saxton, and they were never seen ever again. Completely lost off of Cape Morton. They had no idea what happened, no idea where the plane went, no wreckage, no survivors, no nothing. And what I find amazing is that there is no memorial to them to this very day. But thankfully to the Blackbutt woodworkers, and it's so appropriate that I address the Blackbutt Masonic Lodge, because you can feel great compassion and connection to the work that they're doing, because next year there's going to be a new lectern, a lectern for the Battle of the Coral Sea, and it's going to be dedicated and have tributes on it to those two naval servicemen. And with that, I will say thank you so much for listening. I hope I haven't bored you, and I'm very happy to take any questions.
Peter, the Centaur, that was sunk by a Japanese submarine?
Yeah.
And
it was fully lit, so the Red Cross was very prominent, and because they were in Allied waters, and while there were rumours that there might have been Japanese submarines about, they felt safe that the protocols of war would give them some protection, but it didn't. And that was the reason why MacArthur was so outraged, because it was an insult to, he just took it as a personal insult, really.
I think there's a Centaur plaque or something up at Caloundra somewhere.
There is indeed.
Is it the anchor?
I know there's a memorial up there.
Yeah.
I haven't visited. I'm not exactly certain what it is, but yes. there is a memorial.
It was off the coast of Caloundra.
Yeah, yeah. So it was, really, it's just the history of World War II. It's 100, I don't know if I mentioned it before, maybe I didn't. There's 170 odd museums, plaques, memorials. One of the other atrocities that occurred was the bombing of Darwin, and there was an Australian naval ship called the Swan, a World War I frigate possibly, and it was bombed, and it was sent down to Brisbane to be repaired, and there was the rear flagpole cum aerial that was on the back of that. That came off the ship as they modernised the communication facilities on board, and that is now pride of place out in front of the Queensland Maritime Museum, and it is in desperate need of restoration, and South Bank to the Wisdom has said no.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Yeah.
Any more questions, guys? Peter, let me thank you personally. I know we've been trying to get you here for well over 12 months, just to address the lodge on that. So thank you very much. I know you personally enough to know that you research everything very, very thoroughly, and you're basically a walking encyclopedia for so many different subjects. So thank you for sharing a bit of that with the lodge here today. I'm sure if any of the older brethren who over the years have probably collected more information on that subject than I have myself can approach you with any questions they may have. But thank you sincerely for taking the time out today. I know you've got family. I've seen 100 cars outside your place this morning, so I know you've got a lot of family there for Christmas or whatever else is going on there. I'm sure you want to get back to them, so thank you very much for taking time out from that. So,
third change of clothes I've had today between birthday suits, Christmas party suits. Have you got any of those?
Very busy time of year. Brethren, if we can show our appreciation by acclamation, please.